session, the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Write Good Case Studies and Want to Learn to Do Other Stuff Good Too. So before we get started, here's a little bit of info about me. My name is Leigh. I work for a company called FFW. We do large websites with Drupal and other systems as well. I've been at FFW since August of 2016, and prior to that I was at the Drupal Association, where I worked on writing stories about Drupal and Drupal 8 and worked on the marketing of DrupalCon. So I'm not a developer, I'm not excessively technical. Everything that I know I've picked up after since 2012, 7 years of working in the Drupal space. So bear that in mind, that this knowledge is to help you sort of bridge the gap between technical and people who have no idea what a module is. You can find me on Twitter at Leigh_can. I'm also on Drupal.org, and there's my FFW email. If you get stuck when you're working on case studies, if you need help getting unjammed or just have a question, contact me. I have a habit of always saying yes to people when they ask for help, so if you need help, let me know. I'm here. So chances are you're here because you did a thing. Good job. Good job doing that thing. And if you're wanting to tell a story about this thing, then there's something that must be really, really amazing about it. And what is that? Is it a technological marvel? Did you put it together on an expedited timeline that had the client really happy? Do visitors really love it? Does it have high conversions? Do people tend to make lots of purchases? What makes this thing that you did so amazing? And if you don't have a specific thing in mind, that's okay too. But bear that in mind, that ultimately what you want to tell a story about is this successful thing that you did. And so together, we're going to figure out how to write a case study that makes everybody just as excited about the work that you did as you are. So in this session, we're going to go sort of through the following path. I'm going to talk about outlining your case study. And when I say outlining, I don't mean sitting down and writing every paragraph, but this means getting all of your documentation together and starting to understand the shape of the story that you want to tell. I'm going to talk about how to make the meat of your case study easy to digest. That's the part where you talk about really selling the work that you did, selling your expertise. I'm also going to talk about selling Drupal as a specific solution, because this is Drupal Camp. We're also going to talk about determining how long your case study needs to be and what the tone is going to be, because unfortunately when you write, you do have to adjust the way that you communicate depending on who your audience is. We'll talk about example tones and when and how to use them. And then lastly, we'll define a job for your case study and figure out how to put those words to work. And so for those of you who wrote lots and lots of papers in college, as I did, you may notice that this actually seems almost kind of backwards. So normally you start with the thesis and work your way down, but with case studies, you actually have to reverse engineer from the end. Speaking of reversing, what even is a case study? Does anybody have ideas? Yes, Faith.
So, that's fun, right?
Yeah.
But, so I'm trying to think, so a case study is for a given area of practice. So this can be, for example, like out of a bunch of cars, we look at just one, or in the case of Drupal, it's like we look at one Drupal site, and it's like, let's look at this thing as an example of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, what can you do with Drupal? It's like, oh, well, look at this site I made.
Yeah, definitely. Any other ideas about what a case study is? Your definition was so excellent that everybody's just stunned. So a case study is that it is an example looking at a piece as representative of a whole. And so this may be a piece representative of a whole software or a whole organization's capabilities they can provide as a service. Because I come from a marketing tradition, in marketing land, a case study highlights a specific business challenge, provides an overview of the solution that you came up with, and discusses the results of your work. So, challenge, solution, results, case study. It's really that simple. So, a marketing case study does these things. However, a technological case study can also do the same. It is slightly different, the message is slightly different, the way that you go about getting to the ending of the story is a little bit different, but ultimately what you want to do is pick out a challenge. Maybe it's a business challenge, maybe it's a technology challenge. Talk about how you fixed it, and then say what the results delivered. What about that fix made it a really good fix? Marketing case studies specifically, but technology case studies as well, are good for a series of things. So one, they're great at proving your expertise and showing that you know what you're doing. They're great at demonstrating the value of your work, again, because you're not just talking about, oh, look, we built this pretty thing, but you're sharing, and it did these performance things, it got these conversions. And then the last benefit of a case study is actually kind of interesting because you're pointing people to something that they can actually go see for themselves and interact with for themselves in many cases. And so these three things make case studies a really powerful tool for marketing your work and marketing your organization. The one caveat is that if you're going to write and publish a case study about work that you've done with a client, make sure that you get that client to say that it is okay for you to do so. We have had, in several different positions that I've been in, we've published case studies without getting full client sign-off, and they've been pissed. So don't do that. So here's an example case study before we dive in. It's the Derek Zoolander fan portal. And these are actually slightly tweaked challenge, solution, and results drawn from a case study that I have written for my company. And this specific format is obviously very, very short, but you can immediately see what was wrong, why the client wasn't happy, why Derek Zoolander was not happy with his fan portal. The solution, we go into the few things that we did to fix them, or the few most impressive things that we did. And then results, the things that made Derek happy with his site, such as it being really, really, really ridiculously good looking. So this is just an example so that you have this idea in your head and you can remember it as we're moving forward through this talk. And so as you can see, a case study with this challenge, solution, result format should be short, clear, and persuasive. Because ultimately, you want people to go like, oh, dip, they're super smart. Let me give them my money. And so that means not going into excessive detail, sort of convoluted narratives, or the warts and all aspect. And so when I say warts and all, I mean this is not where you come clean about like the 2 a.m. meltdown that your client had on Friday night after you deployed it and you had to like go home because you'd had too many margaritas and try to figure out what went wrong. That's not what a case study is about. Case study is meant to show you and your client in the best possible light. So in other words, your goal is to tell a story, showcase your team and your clients. So let's dive in. Case study pro tip number 1, you're going to start with the win, and I've alluded to this a little bit as well. At its core, a case study is about persuading someone to do something. And the root of persuasion is appealing to a primal sort of emotion, and there are a few feelings that make us all happy than winning. It's super addictive, everybody loves to win, so start with the win. The best wins in a case study feature teamwork. And when I say team, I mean you and your client, because prospective clients want to know that their money will be well spent when they choose to work with you. So, for example, consider like going to a restaurant, and this is kind of a stretch, but I think you'll understand what I'm getting at. When you go and you're seated and you order and you wait and you wait and you wait, and then the server comes back and asks you a question and then leaves, and you wait and you wait, and you're wondering, where's your food? Like, did they lose my ticket? Are they growing the wheat in the back for the bread? Like, what's going on? That is a really dissatisfying experience. There's poor communication. There's not any sense of togetherness. Versus when you go to a restaurant and you receive prompt service, or the server comes back and says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, we lost your dinner ticket. Look, here's a free cake. It's going to be fine. So if you can't have that excellent treatment of prompt service, then at least you have communication. And that, in its own sort of unique way, is a kind of teamwork. And so that's what we want to highlight in a case study. Everything doesn't have to go perfectly, but as long as you have that line of communication, that teamwork, that satisfied client at the end of the story, you have a good case study. So example wins that can feature teamwork are a quantifiable speed increase, as I've said, or as you can see, or traffic jumps, Better brand consistency is one that I really like to talk about because that really tends to appeal to clients, to marketing people, because they know that they're going to be able to put their content on their site and not have to spend a whole bunch of time making sure that like everything fits properly. So these are actually all really great wins that demonstrate work and unity between you and your client. So a compelling win ultimately showcases how the client was made more successful and how the team's lives were made better by what you did. So MadLibs exercise. And I tend to frame most of my endings of the case study exactly like this, like very few frills. The new platform improved the clients blank by blank. And so maybe it improved their budgetary spend because it reduced hosting costs and let them put that money towards something else. It made it easier for the marketing team to spin up new campaigns, and so they were able to drive more activity to the site. It improved their bottom line because visitors had a better shopping experience and spent more money. Whatever these are your results, so make sure that you write them down. And I recommend starting with a bullet list because, again, at the very beginning, all we're doing is getting our documentation together. So a few tips for identifying compelling results. Like I said, we need to tie them to a basic emotion like happiness, satisfaction, comfort, or safety. Ideally, winning is best, success is best, but these are always good starting places. And then, to reinforce it, back it up with quantifiable information. So that's this improvement thing. So if you can point to conversions, to bounce rates, to load time, for example, if you can point it to they had a 600% increase in sales, that's great. And then that really underscores and emphasizes that first point, that basic emotion that you're appealing to. Any questions so far? Okay, hopefully I haven't lost you all. So we all have the story that we want to tell. We've identified the compelling points about it, and now it's time to reverse engineer. So we're going to move all the way back to the very beginning of the case study, the challenge section. Pro tip number 2. The challenge is the reason why the client came to you for help. So you know what the ending of the story was, what the success was, but what was the pain that caused them to seek out help in the first place? You know what your wins and your results are, and then you compare them against what was happening before. This is how you identify your challenge. In marketing land, we do call these pain points. And I know that I'm using a lot of feelings-oriented language, but ultimately that's what marketing is about influencing people's feelings. So I know it's kind of weird in a dev space to talk about emotions, but there you have it. So example challenges that you can go with are nobody was buying anything, everybody was wasting a lot of time trying to update the site and they couldn't, and it was super frustrating, they were mad and they hated their jobs and they hated their lives and everything was terrible. Ultimately, you want to dig down into what was wrong. Why were they looking for assistance? A good place for this documentation is looking at the RFP. What unique problems did you call out in your proposal and solve? And what was it about what you said to them that made them go, yes, I'm going to go work with these people? And so this doesn't always need to be a technological solution. In some cases, it's we knew that we would have a really good experience working with you guys. You came highly recommended through word of mouth. Or they were able to do it for less. That's a compelling thing too. Budgets are a very real thing. Or the team had the bandwidth to complete it along our desired timeline. This is also a compelling reason for choosing a service provider. So with the challenge, you look at that pain point, you look at what it was that had driven them to go for a new platform, and then you run with it. I want to take a moment to highlight what a challenge is not. A challenge is not a place for complaining. So as I said earlier, we don't do warts and all in a case study, at least not in a marketing case study, because we don't want to make our clients look bad. So that means keeping your challenge to a drama-free zone. And the reason why I'm saying this is because sometimes part of the reason why clients need a new platform is because they have mismanaged their existing systems, or there's substantial team conflict, or interpersonal conflict, or what have you. A case study challenge section is not the place to talk about that. Happy hour is the place to talk about that. So a case study should contain 0 complaints about who your client is as an organization, who their people are. Instead, you're focusing on the process challenges and the technological headaches that led them to seek out help. In case studies, sometimes we do have to allude to the fact that, yeah, there was drama, things didn't really go all that well, but there are ways of doing this that make your client and your team look really good and not dramatic at all. Phrasing. So, if you have to, in your challenge section, talk about things that weren't going well on the client side, or even in your solution section, you have to do this. A really good example of good versus bad is this. So, good, the project had evolving requirements, very diplomatic. Bad, they couldn't make up their damn minds. No, that's not what we say. Good, organizational and stakeholder shifts led to a reevaluation midway through the project. Bad, hissy fits. We don't talk about those, even though they totally happen and they're awful, but we just brush it under the rug. Good, they needed an MVP proof of concept. Bad, they were cheap and didn't want to pay for a full redesign. So these are just really simple ways of very diplomatically saying, yes, there was an interpersonal, organizational, some sort of conflict, but it was all totally fine and we're professionals. Yes.
So on this third one, are you writing a case study about developing the MVP? Because that's as far as the project went. Okay.
Yep. And so for writing a case study about developing an MVP, what you do is you talk about the agile process that led you to develop that project, the timeline, the work that you did hand in hand with the client. Because ultimately, if the proof of concept was excellent, even if for whatever internal reasons the client didn't decide to move forward, you still have a really good MVP to show off. And you can be like, we did this in 4 weeks, ta-da, it's amazing. And then everybody else is like, okay, let me give you my money.
Instead of complaining about it could have been better.
Yeah, then you're saying oh yes, we would have done so much more, but already it's amazing. So here's my case study.
So one way you could say it is, instead of saying was it perfect or not, it's how do we move things forward?
Yes. There's a phrase that I really like. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Yeah. So, ultimately when it comes to case studies, you want to talk about the good, not the perfect, because the perfect doesn't exist and the pursuit of perfection will cripple you. So, happy Saturday morning. So all of these phrasings are to make you and your client look good. Why do I need to make my client look good? A couple of reasons. One, repeat business. This is actually a big source of income for FFW, my employer. Most of our clients that we work with are repeat customers. And you want to keep them coming back. You want to keep them engaged with you. And so you want to make them look good. You want to make them feel good. And you don't want to be that guy. Because it really doesn't matter how brilliant your solution was or how difficult your client was. A big part of successfully marketing your services is in that VIP treatment and making people feel special. If you make your clients look bad, not only are they not going to work with you again, even if everything was totally their fault, prospective clients will see that you're kind of that petty girl. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're always looking like you're a team player, like you're looking out for your clients' interests. And then if you make your clients look bad in case studies, other clients won't let you write case studies because they'll see that you were nasty. So just don't do it. Make sure they look good. So in summary, be classy. Where are my gifts not going? There we go. Talk about what made the client look for help. Focus on technology, business, and process problems, not people problems, and make them look good. Focus on those business needs. So here, we're coming to the meat. The solution. The solution is the bridge between your challenges and your wins. This is the most difficult part of any case study, in my opinion, because you're looking at what was wrong, what was hurting, and then you're figuring out how you got from there to here, how you got from misery to joy, happiness, and rainbows. So you share what you did and how you did it, and the why should already be apparent, because they had this pain. We did this thing because they had this pain. So do provide a high-level work of the overview that you did, but don't get bogged down into the messy details. So an example of that is, to accomplish this goal, we did this thing. What you don't want to do is, the first step was configuring da-da-da-da-da by connecting it to da-da-da-da-da and integrating it with this thing, and then that thing, and then the flush and the cache, and don't, because you will lose your readers. So the the designers messed up my slides. Anyway, we're good. So to keep it simple and clear, what we do is we make it easy to scan with bullet text. My rule of thumb is to have lots of subheadings and to keep my paragraphs short. No more than 2, maybe 3 sentences per paragraph. And when I'm talking about sentences, like short sentences, not multiple clauses and commas and semicolons. No. It should be no more than 4, maybe 5 lines on a page. And even that is a lot. And when you're structuring your paragraphs, you start with your thesis sentence, which should be short. We did this thing. And then 1 long or 2 medium sentences of elaboration on how or why you did the thing. So, wall of text is not your friend, short little sections are. And again, just a reminder, very easy to scan, bullet points, short sentences. This is what you're going for. Even if you're actually doing a written, like 1 to 2 pages that you can print off and hand out, you want it to be this scannable, this readable, because you can instantly see, here was the problem, here's how we fixed it, here's what made them happy about the fix.
Do you typically, or have you tried doing something like this at the top with more elaboration at the bottom? Does that work well?
It does, yes. So being able to have those high-level bullet points at a glance at the top of the section is really, really good. And then you have further elaboration down beneath if people want to dive into a little more detail, and we're actually going to talk about that more further in the session. So, good question. You're on it. So, the solution, again, share what you did and how you did it. The why should already be evident. And an important thing is to use straightforward and simple language, and don't stray too far into being super duper formal or super duper informal. So the tone that I'm using to talk to you in this session is not the tone that I would use in writing a case study. And we're going to talk a little bit more about tone in just a minute. And so when we're looking at what to include, as I've mentioned a little bit, we're going to really dive into this now. How do you know? How do you know what depth of information, what level of detail to share? So again, we refer back to our challenge section. What problems were we trying to solve? And we're going to think about why. Why, how, what the. So that's what our goal is. Why did we do the thing? If we can articulate how doing the thing directly stemmed from why we did the thing, then we'll go into that. But ultimately, we want to talk about what we did and how we did it, and link that back to the why, the challenge. So we're going to have a practical example because I know that's kind of convoluted. You remember what I said about walls of text? This is a wall of text. So this is notes from a call that I had with one of our developers for building a website that I cannot talk about the client, but the website rhymes with Schmolympics. So as you can see, this is a lot of information, and this is actually already condensed from something that, from 3 pages of notes. So it's really convoluted, it's really hard to understand. It makes me want to run screaming for the hills, honestly. So we're going to take a deep breath. And we're going to think about, what did we do? Why did we do it? How does it solve the challenge that we're facing? And how did it deliver the results that we're sharing? Again, because we're acting as a bridge from the challenge to the results. So, word search time. And these are the 3 things we're going to keep in mind as we do our word search. What the, why though, and how? So, the most difficult feature of the site was a cache invalidation solution. Okay, that seems like an important series of words, so I'm going to highlight it. The cache invalidation system was, we rewrote a time-based cache Ooh, that's important. So that the pages were cached for a very long time. Okay. Why were the pages cached for a very long time? Longest would be 48 hours. Oh, it would give us a good cache hit ratio. Okay, so this is starting to come together. So we had these very long cache lifetimes. So when a page changed, we'd use an API to explicitly remove the documents from cache. All right, okay, sure, that seems important. And then to maintain referential integrity, we added a cron job. So wall of text is hard. It's really hard to read on my screen. And so the cron job would pull the Drupal database every minute to see if there were any live state changes. Okay, this is kind of confusing. Why did we need to follow the live state changes? What's going on? Oh, it would send a purge. Okay, so we had this in solution. There was an expiration, cache hit ratio. This is starting to make a little more sense and be scannable. And so after we would send the purge to the hosting providers, these three things, pages that purge when they save, pages that purge referential data, and minute pulling, combined give you a site that, to the end user, looks like it's updating in real time. So this is a lot, but this is not. And this is just what we highlighted. We built a cache and validation solution. We rewrote a time-based cache expiration. It gave us a good cache hit ratio. When a page changed, we'd remove the documents from cache. To maintain referential integrity, we added a cron job, and when the job found changes, it would look up the URLs and purge them, and it made a site that felt like it was updating in real time. So this is really good. This is really close, but for someone like me who's not very technical, it's still a little bit confusing. So we're going to think more about the what and the why. So let's break it down again. We built a cache and validation solution. Well, what is that? What does that mean? Well, as we said, it's updating in real time. So we built this solution to make the site feel like it was updating in real time. And why did we do that? Because it was a big streaming event and we needed to have that happen without completely bogging down the system. We rewrote a time-based cache expiration. What the hell does that mean? That means that we made the pages update themselves as infrequently as possible because it's a big site and we can't have every single page updating constantly. That would make it go really slowly. This gave us a very good cache hit ratio. Why? Or what is that? It makes your site seem like it's going really fast. And so as you can see, we're already starting to eliminate these whys because we're phrasing them as we go through and it's starting to come together. So we're going to keep having a breakdown. When a page changed, we'd remove the documents from cache. What does that mean? It means that when somebody edited or changed a page, we'd pull it out from where it was stored on the site server, and then to maintain referential integrity, basically, to keep from accidentally breaking the site, we had a special program that would update or swap out any old pages for the new ones instead. So we now have the case study version of that wall of text, which we just walked through and I'm not going to read for you. But essentially, we took that huge, really convoluted, lots of developer speak, and we went, what, why, what is most important here? And we translated it into plain talk for the rest of us. So I'm going to stop. Do we have questions? I know that was a lot really fast. Okay. Hopefully I haven't lost you all. We did it though. Yay. Good job, team. So ultimately, the goal of that exercise that we just went through was to highlight how the result tied back to those specific business challenges of needing to make sure that they had a working site that felt like it was updating quickly. So that's what your goal is. You always want to write with that why in mind, that challenge in mind. So you're focusing on the business needs and the business challenges and how you solved them. So as promised, now we're going to talk about Drupal. Drupal is an excellent way of building platforms because it is just so incredibly customizable and powerful and just amazing. Obviously, I love it. But sometimes clients can have a really difficult time understanding why it is that we want to make their solutions with Drupal. They don't get it. They've heard things about like Adobe Experience Manager or but Squarespace is really easy to update. Can't we just use that instead? And the answer is no, you can't. Not for what you want to do. And so instead of having this sort of prescriptive, well, we just build everything in Drupal and what you get is what you get attitude, The best way to market Drupal as a solution and to justify building in Drupal is to focus on that customizability aspect. It allows for really granular adjustments, really powerful integration capabilities, and so that's what we need to do. We need to tie that to the needs. Talk about Drupal and how it solves those problems. So this might be focusing on the security or the accessibility. If they have to write or deploy a bunch of sites in different markets, maybe we're focusing on the multilingual or the multi-regional functionalities. Maybe it's for a company here in San Antonio that serves both English and Spanish-speaking people. And maybe you also have some Vietnamese in there as well, because that is the third most spoken language in Texas. And so you need to have all three of those languages on the site. Well, Drupal can do that. Squarespace can't do that. Drupal can do that. So we talk about how amazing Drupal is and how powerful it is, but we're not talking about the technology. We're not talking about core and views. We're not talking about the modules or the APIs. We're talking about the way that Drupal can solve these business problems that led them to seek you out. So ultimately, don't make people feel like they're getting a same size, one size fits all solution thrown at their heads. Talk about how this is really going to give them the control that they need and exactly what they require in a platform. At the end of the day, Drupal is just a tool. All of the things that we make and we build are just tools. Tools make tasks easier. They get jobs done. So for most people, when they buy a tool, they really aren't interested in anything beyond accomplishing a specific goal. For example, most people do not buy hammers because they want hammers. They buy hammers because they have to hammer something. They need to build something, they need to hang something up, they need to kill their neighbor, something. They need to wall up a hard surface. That's why they buy the hammer. They don't want the little nail hook thing. Or they have a goal that they're trying to accomplish. So Drupal is a hammer. And I know that sounds a little like chaos is a ladder, but it's really true. Drupal is just a tool. So instead of talking about the shape of the tool, talk about what the tool can help the client accomplish. So we have our challenge. Check. We have our solution. We have our results. And we figured out what level of detail we need to go into and how we can throw in a little Drupal there too. So we're getting a little bit closer now to the end of the session, and we're going to get into my favorite part, which is length and tone. So, length and tone. Length. How are you going to distribute this case study? Is it going to be a single slide like what we just talked about? Is it going to be like a 6-page PDF that you email out to clients? These are things that should inform what information you include and what information you leave out. So consider the physical limitations of the medium. Is this part of a sales RFP or a sales bid that you're sending out? Is it part of a packet? Is it in a slide deck? Or is this going to go on your website? And if so, do you have any specific layout constraints? Do you have the ability to have those 3 challenge solution results bullet points at the top? Or are you going to have to be a little more creative with how you display your information? So the length is actually the last thing that I consider when I'm preparing a case study. And the reason is because I like to get all of my documentation together first, have all of my notes, and then from there figure out what to keep in and what to leave out. And I really recommend doing this and getting as much information in your notes as possible, because you can always refer back to it later if you have to enhance your case study or retool it. So documentation is your friend, lots of documentation, even more your friend, but then you have to slice and dice to get it to the proper length. And then when thinking about tone, what you have to consider is who is the audience? Who is going to read this case study? So is this a really technologically proficient person, or is this somebody who is a marketer and has no idea what a module is? How much time does this person have? This is a really important consideration, because if this person is super busy, they're not going to be able to get into those big walls of text and try to parse what it says. You need to keep it clear and simple, and the less time, the more simplicity. Lastly, what aspect of the solution is this person more concerned with? Obviously, a technical reader is going to be much more interested in learning about, say, the APIs that you used, whereas a marketer is going to want to know, okay, but how does it make my life and my job easier? And a site owner is going to want to know, okay, but what governance tools with this this platform? How does it make my life easier? So ultimately, you need to remember who this is, how much time they have, and how much they know and what they care about. Another thing that you need to consider is what kind of people or companies you want to work with. So maybe you want to work with a Fortune 500. Maybe you want to work with a local elementary school. Those are two very different audiences. So ultimately, you don't have to write everything in incomprehensible businessese. In fact, I hate it, and it is my mission in life to light all jargon on fire and throw it in the dumpster. Ultimately, if somebody has to figure out what you're trying to say, you're going to lose them. So you have to consider not only where they work, but what sort of language these people use in their communications. Do they use lots of buzzwords? Do they use no buzzwords? And then that brings us to the length and tone. Are we going to use active or passive voice? Are we going to use long or short words? Are we going to use really high prose or informal language? And so when you choose your tone, you have to basically think between these three different levels, as I think of them, as high, middle, and low. Difficult to remember, I know. But high tone is something super fancy, like a bank or university or the US government. This is where they really like all of that jargon, the three-letter acronyms. They like a bit more detail. They like to be seen as really respectable, really hard to reach, really lofty. They're focused on remaining secure at the top of the food chain. And so this is going to use much longer words, much longer phrases, more convoluted ideas, and they're going to, actually we're going to go into some examples of high, middle, and low. So a middle tone are smaller businesses, a lot of small businesses that want to be seen as competing with the big dogs, but maybe they don't have that kind of budget or firepower. Small and local governmental offices are a really good example of a middle tone, or a lot of nonprofits also use that middle tone where they're not super ridiculous in their language, but they're not informal. And so you're talking to a more professional and educated audience, and they want that respectability, and they want to deliver big results, but on a smaller scale. So you have to adjust your language again. Low tone, pop culture, sports groups, elementary schools, activists. This is written for a much lower reading level. It should have that sort of everyman appeal, which again means shorter, clearer, and using imperative and active language. So an example of high, middle, and low. High. The new e-commerce platform delivered substantial return on investment. Hang me. Middle. The redesigned site made it easier for customers to check out online. Okay, that's a little clearer. Low. The team's new online store was a big hit with fans. So these are all saying the same thing, but just using different tones. As a default, I like to go with middle, just because, again, middle of the ground tends to be really understandable. But ultimately, you have to speak in the language that your audience speaks. And an important caveat is just because you're writing about a sports team doesn't mean that you have to use a low tone, or just because you're writing about a university doesn't mean that you have to use high tone. Because you're not trying to sell the case study to the person who already bought the solution. You're trying to sell to somebody else. So, consider who's most likely to read your case study and go, aha, I want that. Which brings us to our next segment, which is setting a goal. And this is the thesis of your case study. Consider what kind of business you want to bring in. And so I think of this as, what is the case study's job? What am I hiring it to do? I'm going to put these words to work. What do I want them to do for me? So examples of what a case study can be designed for is selling dev work, selling app work, design, selling a business strategy and consulting, selling a long-term support. These will influence what information you choose to keep in and what information you choose to leave out in your case study. And this will help you make sure that you're being really clear, again, about that story that you want to tell. A last note is that writing for specific verticals is really great. And when I say vertical, I mean the higher education industry, the aerospace industry, political activism. Those are verticals, they're good. But at the end of the day, a website is just a website. And oftentimes, the thing that you build for one vertical can work just as well in another. So the platform that you built for a credit union might be nearly identical to what you build for your local Little League. So instead of focusing on that vertical, consider what kind of work you want to bring in. So if you have to cut information for space so that you fit into those physical constraints that you've already identified, use this as your compass. Cut any detail that does not support that goal. It will ensure that your case study is clear, focused, and compelling. So in review, we will start with the wins and the results, and from there, we will look back and remember what our challenge was and the conflict. Make yourself and your clients a hero. Talk about how you solved the problems and how it made their lives better. And know who's going to read this case study. Speak in their language. Appeal to the things that move them. Know what you're trying to accomplish and keep that in mind while you write. And now you have all of this information, you have all of your documentation, you have your goals set out, you are ready to write. Do we have any questions? This is the end of the session.
So, I know there's no one answer, but in your case, W, how much of your work are you working into case studies? How important are case studies for you, and
Critical.
How often do you write in them?
All the time.
Every project is a case study?
No, because we have to circle back to the clients don't always approve of case studies. So not every client gets a published on the site outward-facing case study, but every successful project that we do, we document. And we write lots of case studies that are not approved for outward publication, but that are sent as confidential information as part of bids. Our case studies are actually the most important marketing tool that we have, and therefore I spend a substantial portion of my time writing them.
So do you think you would write for every project if the client was cool with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And we have tried to do that as well. It's just not every project is necessarily worth talking about. Maybe there aren't always those big wins. Maybe there aren't always, things don't always come together. It's not always unique. But in most projects that we do, there is something that is special, and there is something that is worth talking about. So we did an MVP for a client a while ago, showcasing how they could apply Lift to their whole presence. And this is like a Fortune 50 company. Huge, hundreds of sites. Applying Lift to all of them would be a massive pain in the ass. So we did a case study just on this teeny tiny little MVP, and it wound up being a really valuable tool for us in the marketing world. We did not actually move forward with that engagement because of internal politics with the client, but we have been able to use that MVP personalization case study to bring in other business. Yeah. So case studies are important because they show people that you know what you're doing instead of just telling people, oh yeah, give us your money and it's going to be great. It demonstrates the results. It demonstrates your expertise. And if I could only have one tool for marketing, if I could only produce one kind of content for marketing, it would be case studies, if I had to pick. Ads are great, graphics are great, blogs are great. Case studies are the most important thing that you can write.
I was going to say, you have an observation and a question.
Sure.
It makes me think back actually to about 10 years ago when I started in graduate school, because just kind of from circumstance, I was taking both political writing courses for some activist related stuff, but at the same time also in graduate school we're taking scientific writing courses to write papers. And it's funny really just how radically different it can be, because on one side it's okay, this is data, just pack as much text in as you can, versus the other side which says if a paragraph is 2 lines, it's already too long.
Yeah, it is definitely something I really struggle with a lot of our technical staff who like to put together documentation and want to write blogs and help with case studies, because people who are doing more scientific, more data-focused jobs tend to really want to cram in as much precise data and technical information as possible. And if that's the audience that you're talking to, that's great. But if you are not talking to a data-driven audience, you will lose them. So yeah, that is a really good observation.
So I also have one question too. So
Yes.
that's also, because I'm thinking about this from like a whole project perspective, or even
Mhm.
like other team members. How useful is it to like give them some basic education on like, hey, like this is how your project is going to turn into marketing and future business. So like here's kind of like a way to kind of like observe to say like, oh hey, like this can go into the case study after
Mhm.
we're done.
Oh, you make me so happy with that question. So I am constantly banging the drum with our project staff about documenting everything that they do. And that doesn't mean documenting every single technical data thing that they do, but knowing that every time you encounter a problem, a person problem, a business problem, if you just have it in the back of your mind to write down what the challenge is and how you plan to solve it, that is incredibly helpful in pulling together that documentation at the end of the process. And so one of the things that we are starting to do is document, like have almost like check-ins, like marketing check-ins throughout every phase of the project, where I don't sit down with the project team, but they know that they need to go, okay, we had this conversation with the client after the discovery phase, here's what we found, here's what they were most interested in, and just making sure that they write that. And it's not only helpful for marketing and case studies, but it's helpful for your future work, as you said, for making sure that you have almost like a map for yourself for future engagements that may have similar challenges or similar requirements.
So is there any problem with using the same, example, same, subject and writing in two different ways?
No?
Like for instance, you're talking about how someone highly technical would want to write about the technical advancements. Why not do both?
Why not?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Again, just remember who your audience is, and then if you're publishing them on your site, for example, just tag them accordingly. And so tags are also a really useful thing to use. They're not in this because we're getting into the whole like metadata and taxonomies, but tags are really, really valuable tools for you to use on your site when you're producing marketing content, especially case studies. So if you have a case study about Drupal 8 e-commerce content personalization and a custom analytics dashboard, you include those tags in the content item, and then you have that searchable taxonomy, and it makes it a lot easier for clients to sort through and find, be like, oh, okay, well, they did all of these different custom dashboards, all this different custom dashboard work. Clearly they have experience. Clearly I should throw all of my money at them.
I was going to say, also to go off that too, because something I'm looking at doing is like training and professional development. And I've noticed like, because there's a few topics where you can really like cover it in 10 minutes.
Yes.
And I realized like that may even be a case for marketing where you can say like, for a technical side, like you can just make a mini course out of it to say, hey, look at how we learned how to do this, and by the way, this is the project it was for.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could maybe do that as say like, hey, you'll give me your email, and like you get this course to show the actual like this is the secret sauce or the amount we're willing to show you out of it.
Yes. So that's called evergreen content, and we have a word for it in marketing land, of course. And yeah, it's really clever of you to light on that, because you can, again, when you have all of this documentation together that you've collected, even if you're only using a little bit here and a little bit there, you can continually recycle it into things like training or webinars or an infographic or whatever. So yes, it's a very astute observation.
I was gonna say,
Mhm.
something I didn't know the phrase evergreen.
You did?
I did not.
You did not. You learned something. If nothing else, now you know what evergreen content is. Alan.
Getting buy-in from the client to actually do the, to release the case study. What's your experience in nudging clients towards approval, helping them to understand the value for them?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways that you can go about it. One thing that you can do, that we often do, is offer a discount on the sum total of the work that we do, with the understanding that they're getting that discount because they're going to let us write a case study.
You did it early on in the process.
Yes. So like as part of the bid, say, we'll do the work for this amount, or we'll do it for 10% less, and you let us do a case study. That's been really helpful in the past. I don't know if this is an option for any of your companies, but one of the things that we do is to convince our clients to let us talk about the work that they did is actually we have them come with us to events like DrupalCon, for example, and then they stand up on stage with us and say, look how amazing our organization is. We are setting the standard with this amazing site. And FFW, how'd you put that together again? I don't know, but look how great it is. And so we really emphasize that these case studies and letting us talk about the work that we've done with them allows us to help them position themselves as the leaders of their industry, as being trailblazers. And so that is also a really excellent and powerful thing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if the client just does not want to talk about it, then you can't publish it, but you can use it as part of the sales process as long as you've marked it confidential.
Well, and I think, that second point you made about the case study positions them, the value of what you did for them is that it helps them to crank out their mission, right, whatever their business mission is. So if that can help them. It's about them and them being ready in their feet.
Exactly, yes. Your case study should be about your clients, not about you. Of course, like you are the hero, but at the end of the day, it's how you save the bacon for the client. And again, that's why it comes back to also not being a jerk and making your client look really good. More questions? No?
Do you do much measurement before beginning with the intention to use these things?
If I had my way, we would measure everything. That is not currently part of our formal process. Some teams do it, some teams don't. But if you have the option, I would strongly admonish you to get readings, like take measurements of everything. So then also, the value of doing that is that you can compare before and after and make sure that what you're doing is actually working. And then if it's not, you can use it to inform other changes that you make and really drive value for that client. So it's not just a marketing thing, but it's making sure that you're on the right track as well. So yes, if you can, measure. What else? Anything? Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out first thing on a Saturday morning. And again, contact me if you need help. I will make sure that these slides get put online. So thank you.
Super. Thanks.